Hey chums, and welcome back to another video. Now while I've been away from YouTube for the best part of the last year, I've been working on quite a few projects I really wanted to get you all caught up on. So over the next couple of weeks, before we get started on the new stuff, I thought I'd show you some of the bits and pieces that I've been doing while I haven't been teaching classes here at the cake school. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made a very special cake for a very special client. I might have given some of it away with the name and thumbnail for this week's video, but basically I'm going to be showing you how I made a Hey Dougie cake for Dougie's birthday back in December for those lovely peeps over at the BBC. If you head down to the video description, I'll tell you exactly what products I used as well, so if you fancy making a Hey Dougie cake of your own, you can follow along with me. So we're starting with 2 half-sheet cakes, and if you want the recipe for these, ping me a message or pop a comment below and I'll tell you how I made them. We're taking the tops off those to give us 2 nice flat surfaces and then flipped one over on top of the other. You'll notice here I've got a paper template to help me with carving the cake, and I always recommend that if you're doing a character that is so well known. It just makes sure that everything looks kind of the right shape and in proportion. I actually had a few printouts of Dougie in the same size as that shape there to make sure that, as I say, everything was the right shape and proportion. Once I'd carved it to the shape, I then added kind of a soft curve to the whole thing just to make it look a little bit more realistic rather than just a flat topped cake. And I'm constantly referencing that template just to help. I always carve my cakes before I fill them just because it means I'm not wasting buttercream and the buttercream isn't tearing through the cake. So once I was happy with the shape, you can see we moved onto the board and it was time to fill the cakes. I always start with a little bit of buttercream on the board itself just to stop things moving around, and then I put a generous layer of delicious vanilla buttercream inside. Once I've done that, it's time to crumb coat the entire thing, and a crumb coat is just a very thin layer of buttercream icing. What it does is it holds all the crumbs in tight to the cake so that they're not escaping out into the finished decoration. Now if you're doing a buttercream cake, you do your crumb coat, let it crust over, and then do a second layer of buttercream. But because today we're using sugar paste, or fondant as some people call it, we don't need to worry about that second coat, so it's straight on to the sugar paste itself. I'm starting with a lovely dark brown colour here and rolling it out nice and thin, around about 3mm, and don't forget, if you head down to the video description, I'll tell you exactly what products and colours I've used. We use that to cover the cake and make sure it's nice and smooth, and you'll notice I'm not covering the whole cake because I don't want to waste too much icing by layering it on top of each other. So we start with the dark brown, make sure it's nice and smooth and polished with our smoothers before we switch to more of a caramel colour for Dougie's trousers. Now all of the icings I'm using on this cake are pre-coloured icings from Renshaw, so I haven't coloured any of these myself. We're trimming that one to shape, grabbing that smoother in again, and then it's on to more of a mustard colour to do his shirt. Now you'll notice here I made it slightly smaller than the gap I had to fill so that I can then buff it out towards the edges and get a really nice clean finish, although between you and I, the join between his trousers and shirt really didn't want to come together for quite a while. I'm constantly going back to those reference images just to make sure the sizes are right, the proportions are right, but once I was happy with everything, then it's time for a final smooth, and again, making sure that those joints are connected. If you do have to join icing, having something over the top of the join is a fantastic way to hide the seam, and I love the fact that I was able to use Dougie's collar over the top of where the shirt joins his head. It's only a shame he doesn't also have a belt as well. The Dougie I'm making today is based on an image from one of the Series 4 shows where Dougie made a rainbow cake, and actually I made a recipe for Dougie's rainbow cake for the BBC as well. I'll link that down below. But that meant I didn't have to do a lot of the detail on Dougie's shirt, so his badges or his tie. If you were making a Dougie that isn't holding a large cake and hiding all of that, then don't forget, use a reference image that you can use to get all of the details you need and copy them. While I've been talking, you can see we've moved on to covering the board, and again I'm just using a pre-coloured icing, and this is in a pale green. I chose pale green because I just thought it complemented the other colours, but it isn't intended to be part of the design and you can use any colour you like. I decided to cover mine in 2 halves, and you'll see that I'm trimming out a rough Dougie shape from the icing just to make sure, again, I'm not wasting too much. To join the icing, if you overlap the two seams, you can then use a sharp knife to cut through both at the same time, and it gives you a much cleaner line. And then you can just buff the two together using your hands. Once I'd done that, it was on to the details, starting with Dougie's ears. And again, a reference image is so important here. You'll see that I cut mine out and actually then realized they were too big, so trim them down. And then I stuck those into place using a little bit of water before moving on to his legs. We went back to the caramel collar that we used for his trousers, cut a sausage and then trimmed that in half lengthways. And then I just stuck that underneath the body, again using a little bit of water. Dougie doesn't wear shoes, so to make his toes, we went back to the dark brown collar that we used for his face and ears and just rolled some small balls and tucked them underneath those legs. I'm only going to show you one foot here, but you can probably work out I did the same again for the other foot. Now, as I mentioned, for this cake, Dougie is holding the rainbow cake that I made for his birthday as well. So to do that, I just rolled out pieces of icing to around about 1 centimetre thick, and then I cut out some kind of semicircle shapes and stacked them on top of each other. I then used a piping tip to impress lots of texture to try and make it look a little bit more realistic, and also a ball tool with a very small end just to add some air bubble type finishes. This was then glued on top of the cake using a little bit more water. And don't forget, you can use your reference image to help you decide where it needs to be placed. I added some white sugar paste for the plate, and then you'll notice I'm just using a dry paintbrush just to brush off any kind of marks or dust that may have come out of texturizing the cake. Underneath that, we've got 2 more bits of dark brown for Dougie's hands, and that's just a ball that I rolled, chopped in half and then chopped in half again. Stick those in place with a little bit of water, and then it's on to Dougie's face. So first of all, we've got his muzzle, and I made this color by mixing some of the caramel from his trousers with the dark brown we used for his face, and then I added a little bit of orange as well, just to give me the right sort of tone. On top of that, we've got his nose, and that's just pure black ready to roll icing. Similarly, so were his eyes. And then we added in his smile. Once his face was in place, I just added a little chef's hat, again based on the reference image that the BBC sent over to me, and I really do think it was the perfect finishing touch. As always, I finished off this cake by giving it a quick steam, and all that does is removes any kind of corn flour or icing sugar marks, any fingerprints and imperfections, and this is the finished cake. I hope you really, really love it. So there you go, that's how I made a Hey Dougie cake to celebrate Dougie's big birthday. I do hope some of you at home are gonna have a go at making this cake too, and if you do, don't forget to tag me on social media when you finished it. You'll find me on Instagram at Mr. Baker's Cake School, on Facebook at Mr. Baker's Cake School, and on Twitter at Mr. Baker's Cake School, because I ran out of characters. Now, as I said at the start of this week's video, over the next couple of weeks, I am going to be catching you up on some of the bigger projects that I've been working on over the last few months while I've been away from YouTube. So if you've been following me on social media and there are any in particular that you'd like to know more about, head down to the comments and let me know. If it's your first time watching one of my videos here on YouTube, don't forget to hit that big red subscribe button before you go today. And of course, do give this video a thumbs up as well so that I know you've been watching. I'll be back at some point next week, not necessarily the same time, but until then, as always, take care and happy baking. Bye.